All right, so I want to introduce everybody to perhaps the actual worst debater that I've ever experienced in my entire life. I've been debating online since the late 90s. You know, I'm pushing 40. I've done religious debates, I've done comic debates, I've done science debates, physics debates, I've done philosophy debates, I've done political debates, I've done so many different things. And this takes the cake. I think this is my number one spot. Now, I'm not doing this to flame this person. I'm not doing it to shine a light on him. I'm doing it to shine a light on why comics are not regarded as special anymore. Why something happened in the last, roughly 20 years of the internet where people just don't care about what comics mean, what the mythology means to anybody. In the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, people used to regard comics as something special. It's something to use of Captain America and Superman meant things that were important. Today, comic books and the mythology around it are ruined, completely destroyed by people like this who spend the majority of their free time spreading misinformation on purpose to spread some sort of agenda into the internet that disrupts the flow of legitimate, objective information. Now, I understand people can read comics in any way that they want, and that's totally fine. Interpretation, totally fine. Now, there comes a point, though, for an example on this. You're not supposed to reinterpret the planet that Superman is from. Everybody knows Superman is from Krypton. Everybody knows that Superman wears a red cape. So you're not supposed to reinterpret the color red to hot pink or, navy blue. He never was born on Krypton. Okay. You don't say things like that. You're not supposed to say things like that because you're ruining the mythology. You're lying about the mythology, and your interpretation of the mythology is now no longer just an interpretation. It's some sort of agenda-fueled disruption of the flow of actual information. For example, you don't go into mythology in the classroom and say, Hercules was never the son of Zeus. He was actually the son of Poseidon. No data exists that ever said Zeus' son was Hercules. Everybody knows that is misinformation. Okay, it's not a take on things. It's not an interpretation. It's just flat out bad information, and it shouldn't be spread to anybody. So it's my view that debaters like this are the reason why nobody cares about the comic book mythology anymore, and certain other wikis and forums and websites have gone to such lengths to change and disrupt the flow of objective information. Now, again, I'm not talking about everything. I'm only talking about the elements that are logical here, where you're not supposed to change things. Superman flew from this planet to this planet in this issue. You're not supposed to reinterpret that as Superman never flew there. He was actually walking, or he rolled there, or it wasn't even Superman. It was Wonder Woman. Okay, that's not an interpretation. That's just like nonsense. And it's the nonsense like this that gets spread on TikTok and YouTube and other forums. People don't read anything, and they just don't care. They're not going to go into it. And when you show them what the actual content says, they're just going to deny it. They're going to nut it. They're going to censor it. They're going to lie about it. They're going to do anything to protect their very, very fragile ego. They don't care about being wrong on anything and standing up and saying, yeah, I was wrong on this one point. Okay, let's move on and have a nicer conversation. It'll become infinite denialism for the next 10 years. They'll vow infinite revenge on you, and like this guy has, spent a good 6 hours with me denying every single scan. So in this discussion, he brought up about 50 different points, got all 50 wrong, and then decides to tell me that showing him all of the reasons why he was wrong is actually a disappointment. And it's his interpretation, it's his viewpoints that are objective. And it will go down in history as one of the worst discussions that I've ever had, because I've never seen anybody do it to extreme lengths on this level before. I've simply never saw anybody spend 5 to 6 hours over the course of over a week denying literally 100% of every single scan, but saying all of his arguments are objectively correct, even though my counters to all of them are that what you're showing isn't even what the comic book said. Okay, it's usually like this thing that people do where they post, well, the comic book said this, or the book or the movie said this, or this was shown. Well, there's an argument online, and it only exists in the last 20 years in my experience. For some reason, it came around the early 2000s, where people will say, okay, disregard the later issues in a comic book series revealing the truth. Okay, disregard the final chapter of a book where the plans of the villain are revealed to everybody. Disregard that. Only listen to chapter 2. Only listen to issue 5. Explain this thing. Don't listen to issue 80. Reveal that the secrets of the entire story are revealed by, the villain. So the entire objective there from these debaters is to claim that the right way to read books, watch movies, and anything like that is to just listen to the original first few issues or the first few chapters of a book or a movie or whatever. Say this is the plot and this is the facts of the matter, and then ignore at the end of the movie, the end of the series of comics, where the plot of the villain is revealed to be something completely different, or it was a trick or something like that. It was an illusion. Ignore that. Only go with the original. For example, the best way I can to describe this is Dragon Ball Z. Okay, so episode 1, Dragon Ball Z, for example, the villain comes out of nowhere and says, oh, he's the strongest in the universe. I'm Perfect Cell. I can blow up 7 million universes. I am the strongest. And then there's another villain who comes 10 episodes later who happened to be watching that whole thing, and they come and they obliterate Perfect Cell in like one hit. And then Perfect Cell's like, oh my goodness, I wasn't totally accurate on that. I guess I'm not the strongest. So it's their position that you ignore that entire fight that took place in episode 10 and only listen to Perfect Cell saying that he is the strongest that's ever been, that will ever be, that exists in all of existence in issue or episode 1. And it's just the worst. It's just the worst. And it's why comic books and a lot of manga and anime, all the stories are just ruined. And it's why it's so confusing for people online, and it leads to dropped sales in DC and Marvel. And I really, really hope that DC and Marvel and other animes are listening, because the stories that all the authors write, there's so many different canons that it's hard for people to keep up. 100 different canons, 200 different canons, issues that don't make any sense, issues where it's supposed to be some type of, subjective interpretation on this, and it's supposed to be an air of mystery, it's supposed to be and blah, blah, and all this stuff. That's great, but when you take it to such an extreme length where there's that many different types of ways to read it, where there's that many different canons, it becomes confusing. Okay, and it's something that people just don't want to associate with. And it's why the iconage of comics today is nothing like it was back in the 50s and the 60s and the early 70s, where comic books were like a super popular thing. And it was an important thing to people. The kids reading the comics understood the story. There wasn't 7 million different canons and 7 million different authors writing completely different things, taking, like, for example, the monitors in DC Comics and having 7 different versions of them. And then an author comes and says, oh yeah, my version is the same version as those other ones. No, it's not, actually. That's not how it works, okay? A lot of the authors don't read the other authors' works to know that this character was confirmed an illusion. This character didn't even exist. This character was a dream to other people. This was something that didn't even exist. It was made by this other person. And then a new canon is written with that same character, and that author ignores it. They wrote it their own way, which is totally fine. But the point is, there's so many different versions of that that it becomes so confusing for readers that they cannot keep up. There's no way to track all of the story of DC Comics, Marvel Comics, and manga. And when there's that many different versions of it available to consume to the readers, they just can't keep up. And a byproduct of that is the scaling world, the debating world, the TikTok and YouTube world, and the forums world where people discuss all of these things, all of the feats and context of the mythology, and they just can't get it right because there's so many different authored canons and continuities with different answers and different things being shown and things being ignored and retconned and moved over here that there's 17 billion fans who say different things. Now, how are you supposed to enjoy the story? How are you supposed to enjoy somebody's story when specific forums and wikis and websites and TikTokers and YouTube content creators say different things than what the actual content says? Ignore interpretation. Ignore that there's 7 million canons. Why did this one specific user say this one specific thing, even though that's nothing of what the content we're even discussing even said? And that is the whole point of what I'm trying to discuss with other people here. That there is nothing you can do to stop this sort of misinformation. And this one person has taken it to such a degree that I've never seen anything. I've never seen anything like it. Yes, I've had a lot of hostile people come at me over the years. There's people who send me death threats. There's people who throttle my YouTube channel, my TikTok, and make sure that it has 7 million fraudulent reports against it and that I struggle for 200 views and other people get 30,000 views and their videos are super boring and they talk in a monotone voice like this and they don't understand any of the cosmology and they delete comments and they rally others to do bad things, and for some reason they still get way more views than me. And that's just the whole point of all of this. Like the people who tell the truth, the people who are trying to educate the mythology to other people are the ones who are censored. That's just how it's always going to be. The ones who tell the truth about the comic mythology are the ones who are not going to get the spotlight. It's only the liars and the censors and all of those other bad content creators who will get more views because they're willing to use YouTube promote to get those fake subscribers, to get those fake views, to boost themselves. In the beginning, I'm not one of the people that will do that. That's why I struggle for 200 to 300 views, even though I have 5,400 subscribers. And I just can't engage with them because they just don't care. I don't do edits. I don't do things like that. I tried a few of them over my time, and it was just a test to see what people would do and how they would react. And I made these scaling videos where I would talk in a monotone voice, like the AI voice that's on TikTok everywhere. You watch all the other scaling videos, and that's just how like the current society of younger viewers engages. Like they want the AI voice. They want the monotone voice. Oh, Goku did this and Superman did that, and that is how I relate to watching a video. If it's not strobe flashing in your face and like when they do the cutouts of like the TikTokers who are like filming themselves, and you see like the AI is struggling to like keep them in frame and keep them focused, and you see things like blinking all around them. Without that, you're not going to get any views. Okay, the people who actually educate, who do good podcasts online, like the actual content creators from Marvel and DC who have their own podcasts on YouTube and other places, they don't get anywhere near as much views as like the kid who spreads misinformation online, who just like strobe effects, like super fast text online. And I'm joking in my last couple edits that I posted. I'm making fun of all of you. Okay, I wasn't doing that like to be serious. And like the edit styles that I was doing, I was literally just testing to see. And of course, like on those scaling videos for like my Goku thing, for my, Superman scaled and the DC Comics scaled thing, the information in there is legitimate. I'm not trying to, trick anybody with the information. I was trying to show people that low effort edits and low effort monotone copying the AI voice is what people want, and I'm not willing to do that. I want to be myself. I talk fast. I try so hard to slow myself down. I talk so fast. It's just my natural way of talking. There's so much data I need to present to other people, and it's really, really hard for everybody to come around and listen to that much data. Like I can speak an entire book in a few hours on just one of these topics. And again, I relate back to this dude named the Mustard Guy, who got me on YouTube, and he's like, "That's not true. Nothing you said is accurate. We could debate on TikTok if you want." I'm like, "Oh, sure. Here's my TikTok. Come anytime." So he messages me on TikTok, and I don't think there's a way for me to show this entire discussion, because one of his posts, just one of his replies to me, it took me over an hour to read the entire thing. He typed a significant portion of a novel. It was 50 points, a 50-point reply, complete with explanations and images, and not a single one of them was accurate. All 50 of them were replied to by me. It took me over 4 hours to reply to him. I had to take some time off during my day about 2 weeks ago to reply to this. And I've never seen anything like it. I've never seen anybody get 50 points in a row wrong. And it's because of misinformation from other TikToks and other YouTube videos where people do this thing. They do this thing where it's like, I'm just going to post misinformation and I'm going to listen to it. And, oh, that guy said something, it must be true. I'm not actually going to listen to the comic or the content creator or the guidebook or anything. I don't care about that. This wiki said so. This is my favorite guy on YouTube. He said this thing. And all of his points here just happen to be points that like are commonplace on all of the comments on TikToks and YouTube videos and content creators. For example, I had a discussion on this dude's content. Now, this used to be Jobbers and Goons, and he deleted his YouTube or something like that. I had some issues with him in the past, and he made a new account, and now he has 30,000 subscribers on that account, and he made a video about Pariah from Dark Crisis, and nothing he said in the video was accurate, because one of the comics that came out afterwards was supposed to come out before Dark Crisis 6. So Dark Crisis 5 ends, and then this issue and this series was supposed to pick up between Dark Crisis 5 and 6, and it explains how Vandal Savage made the Great Darkness and tricked everybody, including Pariah. And then in Dark Crisis 6 and 7, all the heroes were just spamming that the Dark Crisis or the Great Darkness wasn't real. It's just Pariah's a loon. He's listening to these voices in his head. It's not even there. And it just keeps getting said and said and said. But there's nothing in the Dark Crisis series before that explains why. How did they figure that out? And they figure it out because the Justice League versus the Legion of Superheroes series was supposed to come out between Dark Crisis 5 and 6. And fans just didn't know that because DC never made it clear that there was a gap. And just those few issues that came out were delayed until after Dark Crisis. So the story didn't make any sense. Like, one of the major plot points there didn't make any sense of why these other heroes were talking about the Great Darkness being not real, why Mr. Terrific and the Flash were schooling the other Justice Leaguers, saying, yeah, if you want to believe that the Great Darkness was real, well, that's on you. And if it makes you feel happy to believe that that was real, then go for it. And like Mr. Terrific makes this face. He's like essentially making fun of people for believing that the Great Darkness was real, because he found out during the events of Justice League versus Legion of Superheroes that it wasn't real and that Pariah was just nuts and he was being tricked by Vandal Savage. But fans do not care about that because of people who do this, because of people who are like this in the comments of a billion different YouTubes and TikToks, just spouting misinformation. And then you come to like this Jobbers and Goons second account, where it's Doctor or whatever. I don't even care what his other name was in that, but the point was I made a very nice and cordial comment on his video at like 5 o'clock in the morning Eastern time. I don't sleep anyway, so somehow I was still up for the entire night for whatever reason. I was linked this video, and I posted the information about Justice League versus Legion of Superheroes and how Vandal Savage made the Great Darkness. And by 5:28 a.m. Eastern Time, he decides to delete my comment. That shows everybody none of what you said was true. I wasn't being a jerk. I wasn't being mean. I didn't, make fun of him. I was just giving the information that there's an issue here that explains all of why Pariah was doing what Pariah did, why the Great Darkness was behaving the way it did. And here's the information if you want it. Here's the issue. And he deletes that. And this is what a lot of the power scalers do. They will censor the hell out of you because they know for whatever reason, if you post the actual information to anybody, that means lower views. So for example, let me give you an allegory here. You're in school and the teacher is teaching Greek mythology, and this is the same thing I said before. And they're standing in front of the class saying Zeus never had Hercules as his son. Hercules was never Zeus's son. It was actually Poseidon. That's how all of the old books said. There's not a single resource that exists that says that Zeus's son was Hercules. It was always Poseidon. And you walk past the classroom and you hear that and you're like, what? And you stop and it's like you get smacked in the forehead and you're like, what are you talking about? Like, clearly that is not, why are you lying to all of the class for something? And you find out that that teacher has an agenda where they found out that if you say that Hercules was the son of Zeus, you'll get less attention and less views. You actually, if you say for some reason Poseidon was the father of Hercules, that you'll get more views because those people in the classrooms like Poseidon more than Zeus. So they hear the word Poseidon and they will automatically upvote you. They'll consider you the better resource. They're not going to go in and read anything. So those content creators know that, and that's how it works with the Great Darkness. If you say the Great Darkness was the most powerful thing, if you say Pariah was unbelievably multiversal, infinite, omniversal power, you're going to get the views. If anybody says, hey, wait a second, there are some issues here that were supposed to come out between these two issues that explain the last two issues, you are going to get censored. They're going to strip your comments right off. They're going to strip your comments right off. There aren't any other resources on any other wikis that I've ever seen that even show those scans or even talk about that issue. And the people who do get linked those issues will reply the same way this guy did, this mustard guy, who says that that has nothing to do with anything. That is the answer for every single thing that I sent him. That's not what it means. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say anything like that. So, for example, he's like, you're misunderstanding what Perpetua got severed from. She wasn't a part of a false timeline made by Darkseid. And as I've seen you say, nor was she a small piece of the DC multiverse. Here, multiverse was entirely of DC until Dark Knight Metal 7. In the link below from Justice League Volume 4, Issue 22, this can be seen as Perpetua is sealed in the source wall, and her multiverse is explicitly stated to be severed from the greater omniverse. And then he posts this link to this, and it's just, the classic issue that we know. Again, what he's doing here is saying, do not listen to the later issues. It doesn't matter what the later issues say, confirming any of that. It doesn't matter if there was another smaller offset arc issue series that came out between issues to explain everything else. He's saying ignore that. You don't have to do that. That's the wrong way to educate other people. Okay, you're just supposed to listen to it as it is. It doesn't matter what the context is explained to be elsewhere. Can you actually believe that that is what people do? And this is the most prevalent way to debate things online when it comes to fictional mythology, books, politics, philosophy, anything like that. The facts don't matter. Oh, it doesn't matter if this was said over here. Originally, it said this. Don't listen to that. Don't listen to that. I'm going to delete your comments if you say that. And it just goes on and on and on and on and on. And it's crazy because he says things like this where he's like, Perpetua is severed from the greater omniverse, but the infinite frontier omniverse didn't even exist when she was around. Okay, that is one of the biggest lies. That's one of the biggest lies ever, because the comic starts off saying that the other hands, the other beings like Perpetua had already made their other creations, and they exist in this greater omniverse. And then Perpetua comes around and makes her own that's separate from them. She's talking to Marnovu after she makes her creation, and Marnovu's like, hey, Mom, there are other creations out there in the greater omniverse, and they're not like yours, and you're the only one that exists. They're supposed to die and merge and become what they're supposed to merge with their creation and become a hand. And none of them exist except you. Like, you're the only one that's left. So lying is totally fine to debaters like this. They just will not acknowledge that anything that they say is wrong or a lie. They have revised what the word lie means, but they're not going to tell you that. And that is the crux of how most debaters work. I have lied. I know I've lied. I acknowledge that I've lied internally, but I'm never going to tell anybody that the secret behind why I'm saying all these things is because I have changed what the word lie means. So lying is no longer a lie. But I'm not going to tell you that. So when, for example, another person tells me, hey, you're lying about this, you say, no, I'm not lying about that. And then secretly you're laughing. And after the debate, you go about your day. You go to school, you go to work, you watch TV, and you're like, I actually revised what the word lie means, and I didn't tell him. And I'm totally fine with that. And I'm going to go spread all of that to other websites and forums and comments, and I'm not going to tell anybody that I did that. I'm not going to tell anybody that I revised the word lie to anybody. So this was a lie, and he used it against me like it was a truth. The entire greater omniverse is surrounded by bleed space since it's fifth dimensional, and the only thing beyond it is the sixth dimension, which is outside of the omniverse. This has been known for quite some time, since the superflow in Marvel is supposed to be that exact same bleed space. That might be one of the most wild things that I've ever heard. So in the original version, Grant Morris's bleed space was outside of DC Comics. It held both Marvel and DC. Bleed space is not inside of Marvel Comics. The superflow is not supposed to be the same context of bleed space from the way it was in the DC guidebook and Final Crisis and all. So he's making up his own version of whatever he wants, and he's also revising what the word lie means. So again, he just got caught in a lie here, saying that it was never shown that there was anything else in the infinite frontier of the omniverse. He's changing, by the way, he changes the word omniverse, okay, and the context of the omniverse. So the infinite frontier was the greater omniverse, and the local 52 was the regular omniverse, and they're separated by a barrier. Okay, so when the barrier isn't there anymore, it becomes all the regular multiverse of the omniverse again. So the areas of the infinite frontier are now accessible, and it never changed. That's the whole point of what this plot was. People they're actually confused by a circle, okay, a bubble with a line through it. They're actually confused by that. And this is the fault of some of the authors, and for not explaining all of this stuff. Again, the whole plot here is scaling. Now, it's fine if Scott Snyder and James Tynion wrote their own cosmology to do it their own way, but to scalers, we're scaling Grant's version of this or DeMatteis's version of this and other authors' version of this versus this one. And we're trying to educate other people that the older comics and the other authors didn't use it the same way they did. Okay, and we're comparing and contrasting the differences between all of these different canons, which honestly shouldn't exist in the first place. There should be one canon for every single arc. And that's how it should be. I understand authors doing their own thing, but I don't think it's right for authors to alter the pillars, the actual pillars of the most important plots of DC's timeline and history. Don't change the most important things Change something else. Don't change the most important things, like the most integral parts of the plot. That's my philosophy, and I understand if other authors don't agree with that. That's totally fine. But my point here is that circle, you have a circle. The circle is now split into two areas, okay, by a barrier going right through the middle. The lower half is called the local 52. The other half on top is called the greater omniverse. So the local omniverse is the lower half. The greater omniverse is the top half. What fans are saying is ignore the bubble completely. Okay? Ignore that there was a barrier going right between them. The greater omniverse is actually outside of the bubble. Ignore the top half of the bubble. That has nothing to do with anything. That is what he's saying here. So a circle with a line through it, splitting the circle in two pieces, is confusing. We've hit a point now where the canon and cosmology is so confusing that 99% of the people who scale and debate and post in comments all over the internet are confused by a circle with a line through it. That needs to never be a thing. That needs to never, ever be a thing when you're trying to write cosmology, when you're trying to write mythology for other people to enjoy and aspire to and come back years later and enjoy with their kids and whatever the point. We've now hit a point where the writing is so out there and so many different arcs and canons and cosmologies exist with no clarification on anything that now the fan base is so confused by it that they're willing to accept that most people are confused by this circle with a line through it. And the top half of the circle was called the greater omniverse, and the lower half was called just the regular omniverse. The entire thing is still the omniverse, okay? There's only one omniverse. There aren't two omniverses. The entire bubble is still existence. There aren't two existences. It's just existence with a line through it that splits off this area and this area, okay? It's like a house. And you have two bedrooms. The two bedrooms are still in the house, and they're split by the wall, okay? They're split by the wall. If you break the wall down, it's still in the house. And now it's one big bedroom. That is the point of what the greater omniverse and the local omniverse was. The greater omniverse wasn't in the overvoid. There's not supposed to be anything in the overvoid. Again, so when other content creators say, and this infuriates the hell out of me, that the nil monitors were the same as these other monitors, and, well, you could read it in whatever way you want. That's great. But the point was, what did the comic book say? That's what the scaling is all about, and that's what a lot of people on my side do. I'm only going by what the comic said. I am not going by subjective reinterpretation of how you can read this. You're allowed to do that if you want to. I'm just telling you what the comic said. The comic said that these monitors were in the overvoid. They said they're the masters of the overvoid. So if they're the masters of the overvoid and the hands and the source and the present aren't the masters of the overvoid, they're just something in the overvoid in the new series, well, which one scales higher? Okay, which one scales higher? It would be the nil monitors, because they are the masters of the overvoid. They own everything. They own existence. They own everything, not the overvoid. They oversee everything. That's how the scaling works, based on what the content said, not based on how fans reinterpret it or how other authors interpret it or how anything else goes. Okay, just the content alone, what it says on the paper, what it says in the guidebook, what it says over here, not how fans reinterpret the data in their own way to mean something else. That is an entirely different thing. So again, he was caught in a lie. Perpetua was severed from the greater omniverse, but the infinite frontier omniverse didn't exist when she was around. False. The infinite frontier did exist because the hands were there creating their own other places in the area that was the greater omniverse. The greater omniverse's other name is the infinite frontier. Okay, it is the infinite frontier, and all of that is supposed to be in the overvoid, but then we find out, no, it's not the overvoid. It's actually separated and contained by bleed space. And that's the core plot, again, that I go back to, that the guidebook that came out in late 2021, early 2022, it accidentally spoiled the entire cosmology and the biggest plot point that debunked everything by saying that bleed space was contained by bleed space contained everything. And it wasn't the overvoid. It was bleed space that separated and connected all of these other creations in the greater omniverse. And then the other guidebook said, yes, the greater omniverse was then restored into a regular omniverse again, because prior, that's how it was in Crisis on Infinite Earths with infinite other creations. So that entire bubble of the Crisis on Infinite Earths historical account was the omniverse. Okay? It had infinite creations and it had infinite other things in it. And then it was localized, and 99.999% of it was consumed by the Anti-Monitor, and we thought it was deleted. So that takes the Omniverse and localized it to just the local 52, and we thought there was nothing else in bleed space. And then we found out, nope, that entire infinite other creations that were consumed by the original Anti-Monitor weren't actually deleted. They were just stashed a little bit further away. And then a barrier was put up between that distant area and the local 52. And fans took this other area, the higher area where the original Crisis on Infinite Earths multiverse was set, as the overvoid. And, Justice League 22, Volume 4, Issue 22 says, as he said above, in this scan, that, not that one, this one, that again, the greater omniverse was supposed to be the overvoid, and it had other things in it, blah, 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 blah. Okay, it wasn't. That we found out later that the Crisis on Infinite Earths multiverse was just the other areas of bleed space that had a barrier, and below the barrier was the local 52. So when you remove the barrier, it becomes all the same place again. There's no barrier between the two bedrooms anymore. So it's all just one big bedroom now. It's not that the other side of the barrier is the exterior of the house. But that's the logic of what this person was trying to get across, and it's the logic of almost every scalar you see in comic books content online, and in forums, and in TikTok comments, and in YouTube comments, and Amino comments, everything you could think of, because people are confused by a circle with a line through it, and they think the top half of the circle is actually the exterior that contains the entire circle of two halves. That's where we are. That is where we are with the cosmology. And that's where we are with scaling in general. That's where we are with the mythology of how the fans understand it. So again, the misinformation here becomes the new truth, is what I'm trying to say. The misinformation that is specifically revised by other people. Okay, I mean the regular information that's revised by other people is now the new objective data. And this is just like, it's terrible. It's really, really bad, because it's really nerdy. I understand that. Why do you care about comics? Why do you care about this stuff? You should go touch grass, whatever, blah, 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 blah. No, it's not. That's not the point. The point is that that the actual information is X, but it's been revised to Y. Again, what are you going to do if you walk past like a group of people preaching that Zeus's son was never Hercules, and that Greek history never said that? You know that Australia is located over there. You know that Tokyo is a city in Japan. And then you walk past a group of people saying that Tokyo actually is in Australia. And they're serious about it. And then there's a group of people who go spread that to other people. And it propagates to such a degree that 99% of the comments on TikTok and YouTube are people saying that, yeah, I went to Australia and I visited Tokyo and it was amazing. Oh, wasn't it amazing? And a guy replies and is like, yeah, I was there too. I went to Australia and Tokyo. And you're sitting here like, what are you talking about? And that is like the bane of my existence, and how this goes for the last 10 years. I fight this at all costs. It's just about telling people what the comic book said. Ignore that you can revise this in any way that you want. This is not what this person is doing. They're not revising it in any way that you want. Again, he was just caught in 3 lies, and he only posted less than one paragraph. There's 3 lies in this entire thing, and they're blatant lies. It's not just revisionism or interpretation. Like, this is not what that page said. This is not what that thing said. You're completely ignoring this, and your entire context of all of this is just listen to the first issue say this. Listen to issue Justice League Volume 4, issue 22 say this, but don't listen to issue 75 reveal the truth that this specific event was an illusion, or it didn't exist, or it was a dream, or something like that. And people did that again with the Mixospitalic thing, with Dream of the Endless. And there's a ton of people who have no idea that the entire context of that comic book was a dream state, and it didn't even happen. It didn't even happen. It was a joking dream thing that never actually existed. But you'll see 99% of comments on TikTok videos and YouTube videos about that issue completely ignoring that, because the people who make the content are either lying or just didn't read it. And that's the whole point. Again, I'll just fucking delete your comments, bro. I'll delete your comments if you debunk me on this. I don't want anybody to know I was debunked. I have an infinite ego. I got 30,000 subscribers. I'm not going to let anybody know that I got this wrong. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep spreading the misinformation. That's what that one dude did. That's what Jobbers and Goons' second account did to me earlier this morning. And that's why I'm making this video, because it's a red flag, waving a red flag to everybody saying, yeah, I'm misleading you. Isn't that funny? Like, this guy completely debunked me in these comments and showed that everything I said was complete misinformation. Yeah, I'm not going to let anybody see that. I'm going to delete that. Please subscribe to me and like my comments and my videos. I need 35,000 subscribers for this. And it's a sad thing that his comments, the people in his comments, won't ever see this. I'm going to struggle for 300 views on this. Nobody will give a shit. He's going to get 50,000 likes and views and 50,000 subscribers within the next couple of months. I'm going to lose subscribers. I'm going to get fraudulent reports just for calling him out on spreading misinformation and deleting comments that showed what the actual statements were. That's power scaling. And that is the reason why comic book mythology is completely ruined, because that is what 99.9% of all the debaters and scalers do. When somebody debunks them, they don't stand up and say, wow, I didn't know that. Thank you for showing me that. Thank you for making sure that my entire future is not based on some kind of lie, and that my existence as a power scaler and educator is not predicated on me being debunked. I like the idea that I'm sending people the right information. I want to be an educator. I want to tell the truth. I want to get this right. So thank you for making me see this. I didn't know this issue existed. I didn't know that the context of this issue was supposed to be between these other two, but the issue got delayed for whatever business reasons, and that's why the later issues, the people were talking about the events of that other issue that got delayed. So it didn't make any sense. It was a plot hole. But it's not actually a plot hole, because all you had to do was read the other issue, and you find out, it was supposed to come out between issue 5 and 6, but it didn't actually get released until way after issue 7. So the plot didn't make any sense. So when anybody shows that, I'm not going to let anybody see that. I'm going to delete your comments. I'm going to continue with the lie, because that is the whole point of all of this. It's just to make content. It's a hype train. Oh, isn't it cool that I made a video about Pariah being infinite omniversal? Isn't it? Aren't I cool? Didn't I make give me 35,000 subscribers? Give me 10,000 likes for this. I'm going to delete any comments that debunk everything I said. I'm not going to let anybody see that I was wrong. Okay, so do what you want, dude. Fine, whatever. And that's what this Mustard guy did to me for hours and hours and hours. It's the longest debate that I've ever had in the history of my life. I can't even show you all of it again. 37 minutes, they're almost 40 minutes, and we're into 2 paragraphs, explaining the contents of just 2 paragraphs. This goes on. Let me show you this. Yeah, so it just keeps going and 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 going, and it doesn't stop. It just keeps going. It just keeps going. And my favorite thing is the social cue thing, where the lie is so prominent in their minds that they're willing to say things like this. So you see this picture of this girl. Her name is Dr. Multiverse, and she just gave this exposition in in Incarnate issue 4, which is a Dark Crisis story. And you see these images where the monitors were dispatched by the light to contain and limit the new multiverse to an orrery of 52 worlds. And there were more expositions like this, like Mandrak was the first corrupted by the dark, even though Mandrak came way after the other villains who were corrupted by the dark in the classic story, and everybody knows that. And after all that exposition of Incarnate 4, this is the last panel. And what she says is, I'm only able to contain the crack inside me for maybe not for long. However, it's given me cosmic insight. It's why we had to come to this place. I see all the questions and all the answers are the same. And she puts her hands up, questioning this with a look of like confusion and befuddlement on her. And I'm trying to explain to people, this is called a social cue, okay? When you're grossed out by something, you make a grossed out face. When you're confused by something and you want to question something, you make that face and you throw your hands up in the air. That's the I don't know pose. I'm not so sure pose. Is this the right answer? I'm questioning this. You put your hands up in the air in that exact gesture. But these people don't understand nor care about social cues like that. They don't care. They don't care what the allegory and illustration is showing you and trying to impart into the reader. You're supposed to question all of what she just said. And then when you go back to that exposition and you try to fact check it, you find out the entire exposition was completely a different thing. And he gets into this hyper time thing again where he's like, the Forger created hyper time. Yes, the Forger created hyper time only in the Perpetua creation, okay? It's only in the Perpetua creation. It's not outside of it. And then in later issues, we find that Batman and other characters discover a higher version. So again, the Omniverse was created by Alpheus, which has its own hypertime in it. It even includes the Dark Multiverse and the regular multiverse. But outside of that, beyond that, is hypertime and Limbo and Vanishing Point and the Earth Omega and Elseworlds, which were in the greater Omniverse, not made by Alpheus. So it's a lie. It's just a complete lie at this point. When you show them this, when I showed him this, he went off on such a tangent that it lasted for hours and hours and hours of trying to justify it with a subjective way of talking about this. And in this panel here, this is the end of Dark Crisis. This is Dark Crisis 7. Again, the context here is that you need to read Justice League versus the Legion of Superheroes to understand why they're talking like this in the final panel of Dark Crisis 7, because the Legion of Superheroes issues were supposed to come out right after Dark Crisis 5. So Dark Crisis 6 and 7, all of the other heroes are like, the Great Darkness isn't real. What you're hearing isn't real. It's all in your head. And then at the end of this, Mr. Terrific and the Flash are like, yeah, if you want to believe that the Great Darkness was real, I mean, go ahead, bro. Like, if it makes you happy. And you see his troll face. Like, he's like, okay, that sounds good to me. So, like, even the comics don't agree with what the scalers are saying and what the comments on YouTube and TikTok are saying about any of this, because they don't read it. They don't care. That's the whole point. The Great Darkness was from the Dark Multiverse. It was said to be in the sphere around the Dark Multiverse. Like that's what Justice League Dark said about this, which was a death metal tie-in. So, and then you find out, okay, so if it's in the sphere around the Dark Multiverse, but then Dr. Manhattan's like, hey, the Dark Multiverse wasn't really a real place. Somebody screwed with the timeline of Earth Zero, and that created the Dark Multiverse. So it came later in the history. So if it came later in the history, and then this Great Darkness was from the place that came later in history, it's not the original Great Darkness. It's not real. It's in a place that was a fabricated, contained timeline, just like Dr. Manhattan told everybody in Doomsday Clock, which is a series that nobody read. It's sad that comic debaters just never read it. A lot of regular fans read it because we love Dr. Manhattan. We love, The Watchmen. We read it just fine. And then when there's people like me who tell people, this is what Dr. Manhattan said about the Dark Multiverse, he found out it wasn't real. He's like, it's a contained timeline. It's a new timeline in the DC history, and it's way over there. It's not even connected to the other one. And we find out that the entire context of the entire storyline here is that the Dark Multiverse timeline is a contained timeline in bleed space. And the further areas of bleed space were the Crisis on Infinite Earths Lost Multiverse. And that entire thing was the greater omniverse. So I'm like, so there you go. Every line debunked with comic scans and the author interviews explaining it. And his reply to all that was just nuh-uh. Nuh-uh was all of that. So that's just how it goes. And he's like, yeah, okay, I'll read that. And when he comes back, and he's like, and I had to edit it because I just kept going into it. I'm like, I'm just going to repeat this over and over until you get it. And then I'm like, you know what? That's kind of rude. I don't want to do that. So I'm like, I edited it for redundancy. And so he kept going, and he's like, I'll keep replying. He's like, okay, he's going to go through this point by point. He's like, this scan has nothing to prove that the greater omniverse was Multiverse 2 alone. Another lie. If you've been enjoying DC Comics 2022 event Dark Crisis, you might need to pay attention as the title of the event is changing to Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths. Announced at San Diego Comic-Con at the Dark Crisis panel, Joshua Williamson and the artist reveal the event is a sequel to the original groundbreaking Crisis on Infinite Earths by George Perez and Marv Wolfman. We kept the real name a secret from the start because we didn't want to give away what was happening in the middle of the story. With the return of the Infinite Earths, said writer Joshua Williamson. So yes, it does. Yes, it does. The greater omniverse was Multiverse 2. That's what Pariah was trying to pull in. The Infinite Earths Lost Multiverse was the greater omniverse. And okay, that was the whole plot. It's a sequel to Crisis on Infinite Earths. So during the original Crisis on Infinite Earths, the multiverse was a complete omniverse. There wasn't a split. Okay, there wasn't a split in the multiverse. It was infinite. And then after Crisis on Infinite Earths, we're like, oh my God, the rest of that went away. And now it's just a local 52. And a barrier was put up around it. Okay? The barrier was put up around it. But where did the other Crisis on Infinite Earths Multiverse 2 go? And we're like, oh my God, it was deleted. Oh, it's just gone forever. And then the comic book reveals, no. The Infinite Frontier is the Lost Crisis on Infinite Earths multiverse. And it's not in the Overvoid. He's not pulling it from the Overvoid. It's just the other areas more distant in bleed space. All of that original Crisis on Infinite Earths multiverse was originally contained in bleed space. And then within bleed space, there was another barrier put off between the local 52 and the rest of the Lost multiverse. Okay, so without the barrier there, it all became one place again. It all became just the regular omniverse again. Okay, so it's wild to me. It's wild beyond imagination that anybody can say, no, it was actually in the Overvoid. That the Lost Crisis on Infinite Earths multiverse was yanked out of the Overvoid past the source wall and put back into where the local 52 was. No, it was always there in bleed space. That's the whole point of the series. It was a sequel to Crisis on Infinite Earths, direct from the author. And it was confirmed in the guidebooks too. So, also the comics. So strike 3, you're out. 1, 2, 3, you're out. And his reply to this was just nuh-uh. Just nuh-uh. So he's like, in Dark Crisis number 4, Lex was referring to what he thought about having an infinite frontier. He thought it created an imbalance in the multiverse. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I never said it doesn't exist. I said it did exist, but it exists further and further away. The idea of the omniverse was false. It created an imbalance in our multiverse, with which I believe Pariah has been manipulating. Yes, that's the whole point. That's the whole point. The omniverse was just one location. And as some other people corrupted the idea of what the omniverse meant. They thought it was just this local area. That's just the omniverse. But no, beyond that just local area was more stuff in bleed space, just a little bit further out. Again, the monitors in the multiversity explain this, that the local 52 is just the local omniverse. Okay, the authors explain that there are infinite other multiverses. Well, where do they exist? Where are the other infinite multiverses? Well, they were part of the original Crisis on Infinite Earths multiverse. Okay, call it the Omniverse, actually, because the Crisis on Infinite Earths thing had infinite creations in it. So, again, that was moved more distant. It was so far away that people couldn't see it. That was the whole point. Okay? So with the barrier not there anymore, it's all the same location again. This is basic logic, guys. This is basic logic. They didn't yank it from the overvoid. It was just further areas of bleed space. It didn't move. It didn't move. Just the barrier went down, and then Flash goes past the barrier. And he's like, hey, these are all the other worlds that I've been to from Crisis on Infinite Earths. Oh my God. Why is the Anti-Monitor here? Why is the Anti-Monitor here in Flash Big Bang, which comes out after Dark Crisis 7? I just ran into the Anti-Monitor. He's parading around the area above where Perpetua created her creation. How did he get there? How is that possible? How is it possible for the son of Perpetua to leave Perpetua's creation and go rampage around the greater omniverse, where Flash is currently running around trying to investigate? That's because that is not Perpetua's son, the Anti-Monitor. That's the real Anti-Monitor, who's been eating and consuming the lost Crisis on Infinite Earths multiverse the entire time as the Perpetua timeline was going on. He was indifferent to any of that. He probably didn't even know that the Perpetua timeline and the Dark Multiverse even existed, nor cared about it, because he was too busy in the greater omniverse, in the other areas of bleed space, consuming all of those other worlds and rampaging around it. Then Flash goes beyond the area of creation of Perpetua into that greater omniverse, into the infinite frontier, and he runs into the original Anti-Monitor, who still is shocked that the Flash is still alive, because back in Crisis on Infinite Earths, that's the last time that this Anti-Monitor saw the Flash. He died. So he was shocked that the Flash was still alive. Now, Perpetua's son, the Anti-Monitor, knows the Justice League is still around. He knows the Flash is still there. They talk to each other during Death Metal, and, you know, that entire Perpetua event. That is not Perpetua's son. That's the original. That's the original. So the original was above Perpetua's creation the entire time, along with those other worlds like Earth 26 and 198 and all of those other weird places that Flash was mapping. That entire location was above the source wall, which wasn't the real source wall. It was a fake barrier around a contained timeline. Outside of the timeline was the rest of the timelines. The rest of the timelines that we thought were deleted during Crisis on Infinite Earths. And then again, now this video is already getting super long, and I've only just begun. This conversation goes and goes and goes, and it doesn't stop. He just keeps going and going. And I'm like, you know what, dude? These are all of the other Earths that the Flash had been to. And when he goes into the infinite frontier of the greater omniverse, he's mapping all of these other worlds, like 162, 148, 121. These are all the original worlds from Crisis on Infinite Earths. And there's some new ones, too, because they didn't map all of them. There's infinite. It doesn't end. So he's going to other worlds that he had been to already and encountering new ones as well. And that's what the infinite frontier is. He runs into the Anti-Monitor. And that Anti-Monitor has no idea that the Flash was still alive. He was shocked by it. Completely shocked. So this entire context of that location, that entire area, was above and outside of Perpetua's creation. You can see this, right? If you're reading this and you're watching this really, really long video, all of this context was revised by scalers and debaters who don't like what I just said, who don't like what the comics say, who don't like what the author said, who don't like what the guidebook said, that the Omniverse was returned, the greater Omniverse was returned to the Omniverse again. Returning, because that's how it was prior. It's not becoming something new. It's returned to the way it was during Crisis on Infinite Earths, where the Omniverse was both the local 52 and all the other worlds. Get it? So the contained timeline of Perpetua had a location above it called the Greater Omniverse, and in the Greater Omniverse was the Anti-Monitor, still rampaging around, still causing havoc and doing bad things and eating universes. Below him was a barrier, and below that barrier was the Perpetua timeline. That is exactly what the comic books say. No revision, no interpretation by fan theory. No, I'm going to read it this way. And yes, you can if you want to. You can do whatever you want. That's not the argument here. I'm just saying what the comic books said. The comic books said that above and outside of Perpetua's creation was the infinite frontier. In the infinite frontier that the Flash went to investigate, he runs directly into the Anti-Monitor. And that Anti-Monitor has no idea that the Flash was still alive. He was completely shocked by it. And he's running around worlds that he had already been to in the past. He's remembering all of the other worlds before the Perpetua timeline that he had run to before. He had been there before. He has friends there, and the friends remember him. So, again, all of these other places existed above the Perpetua timeline and outside of it. Completely outside of it. The source wall that you see in the Metal series is a container for this specific timeline. Outside of that timeline is the rest of the Omniverse. The rest of the Omniverse was called the Infinite Frontier, the Greater Omniverse, and the author explains that the entire point of the series was to be a sequel to Crisis on Infinite Earths, with the return of Crisis on Infinite Earths' original Infinite Multiverse. Again, all denial. It doesn't matter what you say. Again, Darkseid. People really hate this idea that Darkseid created the Perpetua timeline, put up a fake source wall around it. And when he says he made his own thing, he took all the myths across the worlds and put them in the ghost sector, and he reached through hypertime to do all these things. It was a hypertime event, and he's like, I created a weapon, and then right after he said creating the weapon, they show Perpetua's face looking in from some other thing, and then the comics are like, yeah, but Epoch comes around who's from outside of that timeline, and he pops into that timeline. He's like, what is happening? What is going on here? I don't even understand what's happening here. Perpetua. Who the hell is Perpetua? The Great Darkness? What are you talking about, the Great Darkness? These things sound like things that I could just, negate through implicate time revision. And then he tries to do it. And then the point is, fans just don't care. Again, where there once stood 52 universes walled off from the greater omniverse, there are now countless universes, and we can sense no boundaries. So even the Phantom Stranger and the Quintessence understand that the greater omniverse was the other locked portions of the omniverse. It was split into two, and the barrier was around a single timeline. Outside of that timeline was the rest of the timelines. The rest of the timelines weren't outside in the Overvoid. They were just floating around doing their own thing in bleed space, and the Anti-Monitor was there the entire time, just rampaging around. They had no idea what was in that little contained, separated timeline that where it had a different cosmology in it with a dark multiverse and a Perpetua in the Hands, and that's why the Hands didn't show up to help Diana and Wonder Woman fight the Great Darkness when it arrived, because they don't exist. Because they're from a contained timeline, and they weren't actual real entities per se. Okay, they did not keep their promise to help fight against the Great Darkness. They didn't do anything like that, which is, again, what the Chronicler was all about too. And the Chronicler certainly didn't come from bleed space. He certainly came from the Overvoid. No, you find out that the entire plot of it, according to the guidebook and the comics and the author, was that that entire area that was called the Overvoid was actually just more bleed space. So they're like, oh, it's not, definitely not the Overvoid. I mean, it's definitely not bleed space where it came from, but it was. You understand that, right? Like that, the misdirection there. He's like, nudging you with your elbow. Like, it's definitely not what you think it is. Definitely not. And fans are like, oh, okay, I'll listen to that, I guess. No social cue awareness whatsoever. None needed. So again, it just keeps going. And I'm like, but dude, Dr. Manhattan told you that the dark multiverse was a byproduct of timeline manipulation. Why aren't you listening? He's like, oh, you got my, he's like, and I'm like, but dude, the antimatterverse was not the barrier around the original creation or anything like that. The antimatterverse was within the orrery of worlds. It never, in DC history, contained the rest from the Overvoid. The source wall was imparted just above the sixth dimension, and right below the sixth dimension is not the antimatterverse. Don't you see that as a conflicting information thing here? Doesn't that bother you? That Mobius would say something like this? Why would Mobius say something like this? And remember, he's like, you've contained my entire existence. And then Flash later runs out beyond this entire location and runs into the actual Anti-Monitor, who is not this guy. He's not that same Anti-Monitor. Fans didn't notice that. And again, it's because of horrible scalers who provide misinformation to other people online. I've been trying to show this forever. Even back in the original Crisis on Infinite Earths, this happens right after the Anti-Monitor blasts the Spectre in the finale. And he's like, this is talking about the Spectre. The Spectre sees worlds that have never existed and never will. He sees shapes and colors and patterns undreamt of and concepts undreamt of by even his master. And the Spectre screams again. Okay, so the Spectre's master is the Presence, who sent the Hands, who Perpetua is one of. And one of her sons becomes the Anti-Monitor, but in Crisis on Infinite Earths, the Anti-Monitor is blasted by the Spectre, and the Presence is like, I can't even dream of what any of this means. Another huge conflict. But the writers know this. That was the whole point. It's just the fans that don't know this. Again, the author's like, this is supposed to be a sequel to Crisis on Infinite Earths. It's like, it's very clear. And again, on the Great Darkness, the original Alan Moore version of the Great Darkness was clearly stated to just be the concept of evil. And the lighter hand that reached down was the concept of good. It wasn't the Presence. It wasn't the overvoid. The light isn't the overvoid. It's nothing like that. The comics don't say anything like that. You go back and you read Final Crisis, and they're like, well, all of existence is emergent. Captain Allen's like, I've confirmed all of this, that it's not a machine, it's more like a plant or a symphony, where it's just an emergent multiverse and existence that came out of nothing, which is what the Kabbalah is, trying to reference, and what Grant said all of this is based on anyway. But then the Great Darkness, in Incarnate 4 just ignores all of that. And he's like, well, I made a deal with the light, and then, I screamed at it, and then the multiverse was made. So it's not emergent. I'm going to listen to the original one and not the exposition given by somebody who was questioning that entire exposition. And, again, like things on the light. Well, the overvoid is the light. The overvoid is the light that was talking to the Great Darkness. But in Dark Crisis 7, she's like, Dr. Light is like, but the Speed Force merged with the light of creation is stronger. So the light of creation is the overvoid? The overvoid didn't create anything. And Dr. Allen just said that everything is emergent. The creation is emergent. Nobody specifically made anything. It just popped in, which is, again, what the religious version of all of this is based on, what the religious version of all of that said. So the light is the light of creation? Where have we heard that before? Well, Tempest Fugonaut says the same thing. He protects the light from the dark. He doesn't protect the overvoid. Remember, the context of the Fugonauts is that the Nil Monitors left them in charge. So he's not in charge of something way infinitely beyond the beings who left him in charge. Do you understand? Do you understand how bad the misinformation is outside of the realms of good education, good educational content creators? It's so awful. The mythology is so ruined. Hardly anybody reads it, and the people who do read it become a social pariah like me, who struggle for 200 to 300 views, while the other people get 30,000, 50,000 subscribers, and they just keep growing and growing and growing, and I just keep dying. And this other part is like, what people say about the Great Darkness. Swamp Thing clearly said in Deadly Green that the Great Darkness was real, blah, 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 blah. Okay, well, here is Dark Crisis that came after. Okay, here's Dark Crisis, I think 4 or 5, that came after Deadly Green, where he's like, you know what? I'm not sure we're actually facing the Great Darkness. Again, the classic, let's listen to issue 1 instead of listen to issue 5. Yeah, I'm going to tell everybody that. I don't like that. I was debunked on this in issue 5. That Swamp Thing himself debunked me, so I'm going to say, don't read Dark Crisis 4, 5, 6, 7. Actually, just go back and listen to Deadly Green. Only Deadly Green, which happened before all of that. Why would you say something like that if it's not to maliciously manipulate information to other people? And again, anybody who comes on into any comments who tells people that, I'm just going to delete your comments, dude. I don't want anybody to see that. Isn't that crazy? That's how it works. Again, social cue. This is the way you put your hands up in a questioning format when you're not sure of what you just said is true, or you're looking for information and you're not sure what's going on. But again, the counter argument is completely ignore that. So yeah, we kept going on and on and on. I kept showing him the Great Darkness is clearly stated in the Alan Moore comic to be this, and he's like, no, it doesn't say that. I'm like, yes, it does. I just drew an arrow for you. I underlined it for you. He's like, no, it definitely doesn't say that. I'm going to keep doing this for an hour. I'm going to keep going, and I'm like, you know what? Even Vandal Savage, again, in that one set of arced issues that was supposed to come out between Dark Crisis 5 and 6, clearly says that he made this timeline. He made the Great Darkness. Oh, that's definitely not what it says. I'm going to keep saying it doesn't say that. I'm going to keep saying it doesn't say that. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Doesn't matter, doesn't matter, doesn't matter. Okay, well, here's some author interviews again. The same one you missed before. Oh, no, it doesn't say that either. Here's some video clips of... the author saying in video interviews where he's like, the Great Darkness, the Pariah just thinks that he was hearing it. There's no evidence for the Great Darkness being there. It's Pariah's interpretation. No, that's definitely not what it says. Definitely doesn't say that. It definitely doesn't say that Manhattan considers the Dark Multiverse just a byproduct verse. It definitely doesn't say that. Mr. Fantastic and Flash definitely don't say, you can believe the Great Darkness was real if you want to. I guess so. It definitely doesn't say that the Great Darkness was sleeping in the sphere just above the Dark Multiverse. It definitely doesn't say that. Definitely doesn't say anything. I'm just right. Here. This is a different anti-monitor that was above the Perpetual creation. That has nothing to do with anything. The Greater Omniverse is just in bleed space. It has nothing to do with anything. What about this anti-monitor from 20 years ago in the comments? Oh, well, that's not even the same one from Perpetua's timeline. That's a completely different canon, dude. Again, he goes from everything is separate to, now I'm just going to put this one thing over here, and now all the canons are the same. I'm going to revise this. I'm going to go tell people, is this the same anti-monitor? Oh, it's got to be the same anti-monitor. It's not the same anti-monitor. It's a completely different canon, dude. That's not the Perpetua timeline canon. That's not even the Crisis on Infinite Earths canon. It's a completely different one. So he keeps going on and on. He's like, but Shazam and Black Adam were on his team. But Black Adam was on his team. You know what? No, he wasn't. Black Adam was not there during this event. Okay, when he punches through the wall, Black Adam was not there before that. So another lie. Keeps going with the lies, doesn't stop. Just keeps going and going and going and going and going and going and never stops. I'm like, dude, this is the I don't know pose. This is the I don't know pose. What are you talking about? It's not the I don't know pose. This is not the I don't know pose. This is what he said to me. This is not the I don't know pose. And I'm like, this is the I don't know pose. That's what it is, dude. Like, how do you not understand that? How could you possibly go online and tell people that's not I'm questioning this pose? I'm very, very confused. I'm so confused. Like, again, the I don't know pose. The I don't know pose. Dude, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? And he gets the timeline. He's like, this came before everything. This wasn't part of. And I'm like, you know what? He's like, go check for yourself. So I did, and I'm like, this is the final panel. This is the final area. This is the last issue, dude. Again, this whole thing of like listening to the first issue and not the last one. This is such misinformation, and it ruins comics. It ruins mythology. It ruins everything when people do that. It's just wild. And he keeps going and going. He's like, and I had to show him the panels. I had to show him that this event that he set up here came before it, and then the last panel came after it. And he didn't care. He just kept going. He's like, look, look, my guy. It's stated in the panel, the Great Darkness is from his ring. In the very next panel, with no time skip, Black Adam is charging him. What are you talking about? You just changed your argument from it was this to the final panel. Again, the final panel takes place at the end of it. And he even debunks himself. The Great Darkness came from his ring. And he's like, oh, no, it didn't. Just concede, dude. This point is super dumb anyway. Just concede. I'm like, but you got it wrong. You literally made up this thing about Black Adam being there when they confronted Vandal. So he changed it. He changed it from all the way up here when he confronted Vandal, okay, to the last panel. He's like, look, in the last panel, Black Adam is there charging. I was right. Just concede. Dude, come on at this point. You are officially one of the worst debaters that I've ever seen in my life, because this whole discussion went on for the better end of 6 hours total. it just kept going and going and going, and it never stops. And again, saying things like, the presence is stated to. This is what he said right here. It's a direct statement in the guidebooks that the presence of the omniverse is supreme being. No interpretation, no fan fiction, no lying, just facts. And then he posts this. Excuse me. Okay. Let's see what this says. Okay. Let's read the whole thing. Immeasurable expanse is abundant with life that is perpetually evolving into a higher state of being. Crucially, the sixth-dimensional cosmic creators installed an ethical component in their creation comprised of opposing principles: fellowship, empathy, fairness, and shared goals; justice versus self-interest, and the personal gratification doom. Multiversal crisis environments are carefully tailored for each world across the multiverse, but from the outset, the whole mechanism suffers catastrophic sabotage. A celestial creator named Perpetua, the hand of the presence, the omniverse's supreme being, creates a multiverse. And I'm like, okay, listen to the first page again and not the next page, because later in the same guidebook, it's like the presence is the supreme being and arbiter of the known multiverse, but possibly not of the greater omniverse. Where did they say that the presence was located? The greater omniverse. So even the guidebook disagrees with you. Here's another guidebook that came out just recently as well. The presence. The presence is essentially the Abrahamic God, functionally omnipotent and omniscient. He resides at the center of heaven, called the Silver City. If there's one deity in DC Comics who may actually be the true creator of the multiverse as we understand it, that would be the presence. Even if he is not the true creator, enough people believe he is, so he effectively wields the power as if he were. He sits atop the prima mobile tower, the throne of creation. He is the entity that gave both Eclipso and the Spectre, perhaps the two most powerful magic users to ever exist, their mission of wrath on Earth. Okay, so the guidebooks don't even agree. But it just keeps going. And then again, here's my counter. Grant is like, you know what? The God of the old world, the Abrahamic gods, aging Abrahamic gods, we're moving beyond them because the God of the fourth world died. And again, the presence is listed by name on the map, the Elohim. And the counter to that is some nonsense of the Elohim being just some group. They're just some group of Jewish mystics or whatever. Everything on this panel is about the deities that oversee everything. The Elohim as a group were spiritual mystics who don't oversee anything in Skyland. Okay? Do you understand that everything on this limbo, heaven, New Genesis, Skyland, Nightmare, these are all lists of gods and deities, and the group, the Elohim, are not deities. They're humans who live on Earth, not in Skyland, or not in the sphere of gods. You understand that? That when certain deities pass away and get revised, they will probably get their own mountain peak in Skyland. So Skyland is the retirement home of all the old gods. Okay? The old gods of thunder and lightning, love and war and death. Here in Asgard, Olympus, the throne of Zeus, the pantheons of the Celts, of China, the gods of Oceania, Mesopotamia, and Egypt. But in Final Crisis, the god of the old fourth world of the biblical Abrahamic faith was retired. He died. And when the cosmology was reset, he was given his own mountain peak in Skyland. That's the context of the map, guys. Guys and gals and everything in between. That's the context. It's not even opinion. It's directly stated in Final Crisis that the presence died, and a lot of people just don't like it. So the cosmology mythology is not in line with the newer versions of it. We scale the difference between the old and the new. So again, this just kept going and going and going, and like I'm not even going to go any further than this because this debate has already, this video has gone on for far too long. But my point here is that this is just so bad for the comics. It's so bad that it's so prevalent on this level. This is in every TikTok video comment. This is in every YouTube content creator's comment section. This is everywhere. This is everywhere. This type of thing, this type of debating, this type of viewpoint, denialism and narcissism to just say you're right no matter what, and to deny what is a very basic statement, a very basic picture, is how 99% of the debating world goes. And the debating world is all over the comments of mythology videos and forums all over the internet. They're the reason why we can't enjoy comics anymore. They're the reason why there's a downfall in comics in the last 15 years. They're the reason why DC and Marvel are struggling. They're the reason why anime and Dragon Ball never really became a super popular thing in the US, even though in our little niche you think it's popular, but the majority of the rest of the people don't consider Goku on par with as the popularity of Superman or, Spider-Man or Captain America. He never reached that point because of debaters like this who just crushed everybody's understanding and viewpoint of Goku. Goku is not sixth dimensional. Goku doesn't have infinite power. Goku doesn't have this, blah, blah, blah. That's the whole point, is posting a counter agenda to disrupt the flow of objective information and to tell other people the right way to look at the facts is to listen to the first episode, the first comic issue, and not the last one, where it explains the events of the entire series were some kind of, trick or illusion, or what the villain said in issue 1 wasn't true. It was all a lie. Don't do that, because if you do that, I'm just going to delete your comments. And again, so that's how it goes. And it's just another vent. I'm sorry that it goes on this long. If you listened to everything, thank you so much for it. But I have a lot to say on all this. I could rant for hours and hours and hours and just show you some of the worst arguments ever. But again, this poor guy, this mustard guy, is the first person that I have ever just muted. I had to mute him, and I get death threats. I get terrible things said to me. I get wikis like censoring the shit out of me, and I have some content creators that dislike me to such a degree that they make sure that my private life and my private work doesn't see the light of day. And this is one of the first people that I have ever had to mute, because this conversation goes on for so long, and it's so intense. It's so intensive and just keeps going and going and going. Denialism on a level that I've never experienced before. Hours and hours and days worth of this. And then afterwards, he claims that he beat me. He absolutely trumped me on all of this. He's like, after all of that, oh, you were debunked on everything. By the way, between this point right here and this point right here, there was so much more. There was so much more. There were pages and pages and pages that went missing. So he clearly deleted a lot of the stuff. And after all that, he's like, I won. I'm going to go to other places and show people that I won. I beat you. I said whatever I wanted. And I beat you. Here he's, seems like you're just a bit upset, dude. He keeps going and telling other people that he won in other topics. This is what this guy does. He spends his days just spreading misinformation. He just keeps going and going and going and going. And so, yeah. And I had to say, this is why I regard him as one of the worst debaters I've ever spoken to in my life. He's so bad that I had to mute him and discontinue talking. Does anyone realize what it takes for me to do such a thing? I let people hit me with death threats and some of the most wild, worst counters imaginable. I almost never mute or block anyone. But this guy, I'd love to dump a Google Doc that's like an entire 5 to 8 hour read or something like that, but it's just too big. I can't do it. And I think the Chrome extension downloaders don't show images like this. I think it's just the text or whatever. Whatever, that is the point. But I estimated between 8 and 9 hours for a total read on our entire conversation there. So it's quite a thing to watch this go down live. And you just can't win. And I hate to tell other people this, but you're being manipulated by bad viewpoints. You're being manipulated by people who don't read. You should be upset. You should be, at least, a little bit emotional over being treated so unfairly and censored. Like, again, Jobbers and Goons' page there just deletes my comments because I explained the objective information that existed, but he didn't want anybody to see that. So when people do that, you should maybe, consider not listening to those people. If they're willing to censor you from all of that information and lie to you and continue the lie, even knowing that they were wrong. Don't subscribe to them. Don't give them what they want. Don't give them the views. You know, my channel, for example, here is set up to debunk those other people and shine lights on other people misleading everybody else. But all of those people who mislead other people are getting more and more attention, while I'm getting less and less attention. So let's try to reverse that. Let's try to reverse that for the first time and not allow misinformation to be spouted on such a level and censored like that, because he's mistreating you. Those other content creators are mistreating you. They consider you stupid. You're not going to go read it. You're not going to listen to the other people. I got 30,000 subscribers, so listen to me. You know, I make live streams. Listen to me. I'm going to delete anybody's comments who debunk anything that I say. I don't want anybody to see this. So just keep liking my stuff. Keep giving me subscribers. Keep giving me views. While the people who are debunking me and showing me that I'm misleading everybody on purpose are not getting views and, you know, getting fraudulent reports to the point where I can't get past 300 views. You know, ousting other people usually online like leads to a lot of views and attention. But for some reason, when it comes to the comic book thing, it's the reverse. When anybody publicly denounces somebody else as fraudulent or misleading or removing, you know, the truthful comments, they are not rewarded at all. They're actually denounced. They are thumbed down. And it is the people who spread the misinformation, who delete all of that stuff, who are getting more views and more subscribers over time instead of losing it. So how about we change that? How about we respect the content? We respect the author's word. We stop this no respect for the content creators thing. How about we solidify that we are allowed to have interpretations over what the meaning of things is, but we're not supposed to reinterpret the color of Superman's cape to bright yellow instead of red, and the planet he lived on was Pluto instead of Krypton, and it was never Krypton. Those are the equivalent things that these debaters are doing. They should not be supported in any way, shape, or form.